The ship shuddered like an old man coughing up his last bit of dignity. Captain Felon stood hunched at the control panel, his eyes glued to the radars that were about as reliable as a sandpaper condom. "She's holding together by sheer spite," Felon muttered, trying to coax another ounce of power from the jittery systems. "Spite's more than we've got," smirked Dax, the engineer who'd once dismantled a Blorgan death ray with nothing but a rusting wrench and a hangover. "But hey, it's a living, or whatever this is." Outside, the Starship graveyard spun lazily around a black hole, like cosmic trash orbiting nature's biggest flush. Derelict spaceships floated in the void, relics of conflicts nobody remembered. In the cockpit, the air was thick with the smell of burnt circuitry and regret. "You think there's anything out there worth salvaging?" asked Rain, their psychic navigator, her mind simultaneously tuned into 3 different frequencies, none of which included optimism. "If not, I'm sure we can find a nice corner to curl up and die in peacefully," Felon replied. The comms crackled to life, the voice of their resident telepath, Cray, cutting through like a knife through optimism. "Picked up something interesting on the old wreck to starboard. Could be food stores, Earth stuff." "Earth food?" Dax perked up, like a dog that just heard the word walk. "You mean real food?" "Not that alien goop that tastes like sadness and looks like my ex-mother-in-law's cooking." "Exactly," Cray confirmed, sounding as enthusiastic as a man who just discovered a new flavor of gruel. "Assuming the rats haven't formed a union and claimed it as their own." "Guess that's our cue," Felon said, slapping the panel with a confidence he didn't feel. "Rain, get us aligned." Dax prepped the EVA suits. "Cray, stay on the comms. Let's go see if we can taste something other than despair for a change." The ship groaned as they maneuvered closer to the derelict hulk. The thing looked like it had seen better days, probably before anyone aboard was born. Panels hung off like broken teeth, and scorch marks told tales of battles fought long ago, probably by people who were as bad at winning as Felon and his team. "Why do I feel like we're the punchline to some cosmic joke?" Dax asked, handing Rain an EVA suit. "We're risking life and limb for a can of beans." "Because we are," Rain replied, sliding into her suit. "But it's not like we have better options." "Right," Felon said, pulling on his helmet. "Remember, folks, we're not heroes. We're opportunists with a cause." "And what cause is that, exactly?" Cray chimed in over the comms. "Not starving," Dax replied, snapping his helmet in place. "And if we happen to screw over the alien overlords in the process, all the better." They floated toward the derelict. The silence of space was all-encompassing, a quiet so loud it screamed. Inside the hulk, the corridors were narrow and dark, the kind of place you'd expect to find either treasure or trouble, maybe both. "Let's hope it's treasure," Felon muttered, flicking on his suit's lights. They cast eerie beams down the metal halls, catching motes of dust that had probably been drifting since the last sane person had set foot here. The food storage area was a cavernous space filled with crates labeled in the language of old Earth, the kind of language none of them spoke, but thankfully, hunger was a universal translator. The seals were intact, a small miracle in a universe that seemed hell-bent on pissing in their cereal. "If this is a trap, it's a damn good one," Rain said, floating over to inspect a crate. "These seals are holding better than my last relationship." "If it's a trap," Dax added, prying open a crate, "then I'm happy to walk right into it if it means decent chow." The first crate contained canned goods, the labels faded but the contents unmistakable. "Beans," Felon announced, with all the ceremony of a knight bestowing a great honor. "Beans," Dax repeated, a grin spreading. "I can live with that. You might be the only one," Rain snorted, eyeing the beans with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "All right, let's get these back to the ship before something decides it wants to share," Felon ordered, already wrestling a crate toward the exit. As they drifted back toward their ship, their helmets filled with Cray's voice. "Heads up. Sensors picking up a ship on the edge of the graveyard. Friend or foe?" Felon asked, already knowing the answer. "When's it ever been a friend?" Cray replied, the sound of him chewing something coming through loud and clear. "Great," Felon sighed. "Let's haul ass, folks." The ship appeared on the edge of their sensor range, sleek and menacing, like a panther that hadn't eaten in a while and just spotted a weak gazelle. "Looks like the kind of ship that doesn't take no for an answer," Dax muttered, securing his crate. "The kind that thinks consent is a dirty word," Rain added, already calculating their best escape route. "Let's not stick around to correct their manners," Felon said, guiding the crates into the cargo hold with the finesse of a man wrestling an angry octopus. Back on board, the ship's engines roared to life with all the enthusiasm of a cat being dragged to the vet. They lurched away from the derelict, the crates of precious Earth food safely aboard. "No sign of pursuit," Cray reported, sounding disappointed. "Guess they're not interested in us yet." "Yet," Felon repeated, knowing full well that yet was just another way of saying soon. They made their way back to the relative safety of their hideout, a pocket of twisted spacetime where the black hole's pull was weakest. It wasn't much, but it was home, at least until something better or worse came along. "So what's the plan, boss?" Rain asked once they'd secured their prize. "We going to live off canned beans until we all look like one? That or sell them to the highest bidder," Dax suggested. "Earth food's more valuable than gold to the right buyer. The plan," Felon said, looking at the crates as if they were a map to the promised land, "is to not just survive, but to make sure those alien bastards know we're not going down without a fight. And beans are going to do that?" Cray asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "Better than the shit they feed us," Felon shot back. "Besides, it's not just about the food, it's about what it represents. Humanity's culinary defiance," Rain suggested with a smirk. "Something like that," Felon nodded, eyes filled with a mix of determination and that all-too-familiar grim amusement. "Let's show them that we're not just leftovers." The crew set about organizing the haul, finding places for the crates amidst the clutter of their ship. As they worked, the reality of their situation settled in, a ragtag crew of psychic soldiers, rebels in a universe that barely acknowledged their existence, clinging to a hope as fragile as the seals on those ancient cans. And yet, there they were, in the belly of a starship graveyard, laughing at the absurdity of it all. "If we get out of this, I'm opening a restaurant," Dax declared, balancing a crate on one shoulder. "Specializing in Nautalian cuisine. Only if you promise to hire a chef," Rain quipped, nudging him with her elbow. "You wound me," Dax replied, though his grin showed he was anything but. As the ship settled into its hiding spot, Felon leaned back in his chair, watching the stars drift lazily by through the viewport. Somewhere out there were the alien overlords who'd once thought humanity was ripe for the picking. "Hope they choke on their own arrogance," Felon muttered, raising an imaginary toast to the cosmos, "because we've got more than beans up our sleeves." The darkness of space stretched on endlessly, but if you squinted just right, you could almost see the faint glimmer of a future worth fighting for. The ship's hold echoed with the clatter of cans and the sizzle of an impending revelation. Felon, Dax, Rain, and Craig gathered around an alien prisoner they'd affectionately named Squeaky, a nickname that came from the unfortunate sound it made every time it tried to communicate in its own language, which was an intriguing mix of whale song and a dial-up modem. "All right, Squeaky," Felon said, holding up a can of beans like it was the holy grail. "Time to see if Earth cuisine is the universal poison it's cracked up to be." Squeaky's eyes, or what passed for eyes, extended on stalks, scanning the can with a mix of curiosity and existential dread. It lacked the kind of mouth you'd typically expect to find on a creature, but Felon had learned not to underestimate the digestive creativity of aliens. "Think it'll explode?" Dax asked, leaning against a console with the ease of someone who'd seen explosions go both horribly wrong and hilariously right. "Not unless it's got a really bad bean allergy," Rain replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she handed the can opener to Felon. "Or maybe it'll just implode from sheer disgust. I'd put money on that," Cray chimed in from his spot at the comms, where he was monitoring the space around their little corner of oblivion. "But then again, I've lost money on weirder bets." With a deftness that belied the situation's absurdity, Felon cracked open the can and presented its contents to Squeaky. The alien sniffed, an action that involved a series of unsettling clicks and whirs. The anticipation in the room was thick enough to slice with a knife, though not nearly as appetizing. "Here goes nothing," Felon said, as they all watched on with morbid curiosity. Squeaky hesitated, its stalk eyes flicking from the beans to the humans, as if trying to understand what kind of psychotic purge ritual it was being roped into. "Come on, Squeaky, don't leave us hanging," Dax urged, like a chef impatiently waiting for critics' verdict. "It's just beans." Squeaky finally extended a tendril into the can, lifting a single bean into what might have been its mouth. There was a moment of stillness, the kind that usually precedes either a grand revelation or the kind of explosion that leaves scorch marks on ceilings, and then it happened. Squeaky shuddered as if struck by a lightning bolt of pure horror. It made a sound somewhere between a cat in distress and a cheese grater caught in a blender. The alien's entire body convulsed, and it emitted a noise that could only be described as a desperate plea for the sweet release of death. "Guess beans are off the menu," Rain noted, wrinkling her nose at the spectacle. "Our culinary reputation's intact. I suppose we can cross gourmet chefs off our career options," Dax observed wryly, as Squeaky writhed pitifully. "Doesn't seem to agree with him," Cray smirked, looking away from his monitors just long enough to enjoy the show. "You think it'll send out a Yelp review?" Felon watched as Squeaky eventually settled into a defeated, twitching heap. "Right," he said, the grim amusement never leaving his face. "That settles it. Earth food is effectively alien kryptonite." Dax's eyes lit up with a spark of mischief. "Could we use this? I mean, weaponize it." "It's genius," Rain said, half joking, half serious. "Who would have thought the key to our survival would be a can of beans?" "Humanity's secret weapon coming to a battlefield near you." Cray shook his head, the faint sound of chewing once again audible through the comms. "We'd better hope the aliens don't have a taste for nachos. All right, let's not get ahead of ourselves, Felon cautioned, though he was clearly considering the potential. We need a plan. Something that doesn't end with us choking on our own hubris. Just then, a warning light on Cray's console flared to life, casting an ominous red glow over the room. Cap, Cray said, his voice suddenly serious. Got a patrol ship coming in hot. Looks like it's on a direct path. Great timing, Dax grumbled as he checked the systems. Just when we're out here in the open, pants around our ankles. Can we outrun it? Rain asked, already mapping out scenarios in her mind, each more improbable than the last. We've got a choice, Felon said, scanning the console with a grimace. We either hide and hope they pass us by, or we take our chances and run. Running would require our engines to actually work, Dax pointed out, ever the realist. And last I checked, they're about as dependable as a politician's promise. Hide it is then, Felon decided, punching in coordinates for the nearest cluster of derelict ships. They could offer some cover, if not much else. The crew sprang into action, the ship lurching under Felon's command as they made for the graveyard's tangled mass of dead metal and forgotten dreams. Outside, the stars blurred into streaks of light as they moved, the tension in the air a tangible thing. How long until they're on top of us? Rain asked, securing her station with a quick glance. Minutes, Cray replied, his voice calm despite the urgency. So, plenty of time for a Hail Mary, or a hail of bullets, Dax added darkly, checking the limited armaments they had left. The ship slipped between the hulks of the derelict fleet, their metal bodies like silent sentinels keeping watch over the forgotten corners of the universe. The patrol ship loomed closer, a predatory shadow against the backdrop of starlight. Keep it steady, Felon ordered, his grip tight on the controls. They nestled in the shadow of a particularly large cruiser, its silhouette broken against the void. Silence settled over them like a heavy cloak, each member of the crew acutely aware of the patrol ship's presence. It was the kind of silence that made your skin crawl, the kind that felt like the universe holding its breath. Weapons? Felon asked, his voice a low murmur as if afraid to disturb the cosmos' precarious balance. Armed to the teeth, Cray said, his tone suggesting he'd much prefer those teeth to stay firmly away from them. They're scanning. Let's hope they're as blind as an accountant at a strip club, Dax whispered, his words barely audible. The patrol ship drifted closer, its sensors sweeping the area with methodical precision. Felon watched tense as the blips on the radar danced, each one a potential harbinger of disaster. The ship crept overhead, its ominous bulk casting a shadow that seemed to stretch forever. Steady, Felon breathed, willing the ship to stay silent, to blend into the debris like another forgotten wreck. Seconds turned into agonizing minutes. The patrol ship paused, hanging there like a thief in the night contemplating its next move. They all held their breath, waiting for the telltale sign of discovery, the siren scream of alarms, the flash of lights, but nothing came. The patrol ship hovered a moment longer before it resumed its course, gliding away as quietly as it had arrived. They're moving off, Craig confirmed, his voice breaking the tension like a hammer through glass. Looks like they didn't find us. A collective exhale followed, relief mixing with the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Guess we're not dead yet, Rain said, the words laced with a dark humor that felt almost victorious. Guess not, Felon agreed, a small, grim smile playing on his lips. Now let's get the hell out of here before they change their minds. Back to the hideout, Dax asked, already plotting a course. Yeah, Felon nodded. We've got plans to make and beans to strategize, and so they returned to their hideout, the reality of their situation both a burden and a boon as they pondered their next move. With a patrol ship looming and the aliens' weakness confirmed, they had the pieces of a plan, one that would require every ounce of cunning, every drop of luck, and perhaps a few more cans of beans. As they settled in, preparing for what lay ahead, Felon looked around at his crew. They were a mismatched bunch, scarred by the universe and hardened by its indifference. But there was strength in that, in the shared struggle and the laughter in the face of annihilation. Let's show them what humans can do, he said, his voice carrying the weight of promise and the edge of defiance. And somewhere in the vast, uncaring expanse of space, the universe listened, waiting to see if these ragtag rebels would make good on their vow to fight, to survive, not just as individuals, but as the irreverent, indomitable species they were. In the silence that followed, one could almost hear the faint, hopeful whisper of possibility amidst the stars. The ship hummed with the kind of uneasy quiet that told you things were just about to go sideways. Felon rubbed his temples, feeling the dull throb of tension that had settled in ever since they'd slipped into the Starship graveyard. The black hole's gravity was doing a number on his head, like a hangover that just wouldn't quit. It didn't help that the rest of the crew looked ready to snap, either. Well, that was fun, Rain drawled, kicking back in her chair with the nonchalance of someone who didn't give a rat's ass about imminent doom. Nothing like a good game of hide-and-seek to start the day. Yeah, next time let's play tag with a supernova, Dax muttered, trying to get the radar to stop flickering like it had a nervous twitch. I swear this thing's got more bugs than a termite mound. Felon shot him a look. Let's not tempt fate. The universe has a bad habit of taking suggestions literally. Cray leaned back, his chair squeaking in protest. So, what's the plan, fearless leader? Beans and more beans. Or should we start a petition to get the universe to cut us some slack? How about we first make sure we're not going to get sucked into a black hole like a bad sci-fi movie? Felon replied, glancing nervously at the navigational controls, which were about as reliable as a weather forecast on Venus. Ah, the good old plan of not dying, Rain said with mock seriousness. My favorite, speaking of not dying, Dax piped up. How's everyone's head? That black hole's got me feeling like I've been mainlining caffeine for a week straight. Same, Rain admitted, her expression briefly serious. Feels like someone's trying to play a sadistic symphony in my skull. Yeah, well, we signed up for this, Cray pointed out, though his usual bravado seemed a bit dimmed. Rebellion wasn't going to be a walk in the park. Sure, Rain shot back, but I assumed there might be fewer existential migraines. Look, Felon cut in, we knew this wasn't going to be easy, but whining about it isn't going to help. We need to adapt. Adapt? Dax snorted. Like what? Grow extra brains to handle the psychic overload. That'd be a start, Felon said, refusing to be baited. But maybe let's start with more immediate concerns, like not getting caught. So we're back to running and hiding, Rain said with a wry smile. Our grand strategy continues to impress. Unless you've got a better idea, Felon asked, one eyebrow raised. Rain shrugged. I'm just here to provide the witty commentary. Which isn't helping, Dax grumbled, though there was no real bite behind it. We've got bigger problems than just the patrols. The longer we hang around here, the worse it's going to get. Yeah, I've noticed, Felon acknowledged, glancing at Squeaky, who was still recovering from its encounter with Earth cuisine. We need to figure out our next steps. We can't keep playing this game of cosmic dodgeball. We've got a few options, Cray said, tapping the arm of his chair thoughtfully. None of them good, but hey, when has that stopped us? Enlighten us, Rain said, leaning forward with feigned interest. Well, Cray began, ticking off fingers. We could try to get further into the graveyard, see if there are any ships we could salvage. Might find something that could help with the headaches. Or make them worse, Dax pointed out darkly. True, Cray conceded. Then there's the option of trying to contact some of the other resistance cells, see if we can get some intel on patrol movements, and paint a big target on our backs, Rain asked skeptically. Or third option, Cray continued, we go in guns blazing, see if we can't take out a patrol ship or two and make some noise. Felon considered this, the gears in his mind turning slowly. Right, so two options that might kill us and one that's definitely suicidal. Lovely. Hey, you wanted options, Cray said with a grin. Let's focus on not getting killed first, Felon decided. We'll see about contacting other cells, but only if we can do it without setting off alarms. Good luck with that, Dax muttered, still wrestling with the console. This heap couldn't send a postcard without blowing a fuse. Then we improvise, Felon said, though he sounded less convinced than he'd have liked. Rain, you and Dax see if there's anything salvageable nearby. Cray, keep an eye on those patrols. And you? Rain asked. I'll be here holding this pile of junk together with sheer force of will, Felon replied dryly. Right, Rain said, pushing herself up and stretching. Let's go play scavenger hunt in the galaxy's biggest junkyard. Dax grunted in agreement, the two heading towards the airlock. Just remember, he called back, if we find anything that looks like an ancient curse, it's yours. Noted, Rain said, rolling her eyes. As they left, Felon sighed, turning his attention back to the controls. The black hole loomed at the edge of their vision, a constant reminder of the precariousness of their situation. He rubbed his temples again, wondering if the universe would ever cut them a break. Hey, Cap, Cray said after a moment, his voice quieter. You think we'll make it out of this mess? Felon didn't answer right away, weighing his words. I think we have to try, he said finally. Not just for us, but for everyone counting on us. Cray nodded, the corner of his mouth twitching upwards. Fair enough, just let me know when it's time to play hero. I've got some dramatic one-liners I've been saving. Felon chuckled, though the sound was more weary than amused. I'll keep that in mind. Silence fell again, the kind that was almost comfortable in its familiarity. Felon focused on the data streaming in, trying not to think too hard about the odds stacked against them. It was a losing battle, but one he was determined to fight, if only because giving up wasn't an option. Rain and Dax moved through the narrow corridors of the ship, the air heavy with the scent of metal and stale hope. So, Rain said, breaking the silence, what's your take on all this? You actually think we'll find something useful out there? Dax shrugged, his expression hidden in the shadows. Doubt it, but it beats sitting around waiting for our brains to melt. True, Rain agreed, though these headaches make me wish I'd just stayed home. Home, Dax echoed with a snort. Yeah, like that's an option. Last I checked, home was a crater. Fair point, Rain admitted, though her tone was uncharacteristically subdued. Still, would have been nice to have a choice. Wouldn't we all? Dax said, pausing at the airlock. He checked the seals, making sure everything was in order. Ready, as I'll ever be, Rain replied, trying to muster some enthusiasm. Let's go see what junk we can find. The airlock cycled open, revealing the vast, tangled expanse of the Starship graveyard. They stepped out, their suits crackling with static as they left the relative safety of their ship. Rain squinted into the darkness, the derelict hulks looming around them like forgotten giants. Any bets on what we'll find first? Dax asked, his voice crackling over the comms. Probably a whole lot of nothing, Rain replied, clambering over a twisted mass of metal. Maybe some more cans of beans. Great, Dax said dryly. I could use a snack. The two moved cautiously, their lights cutting through the shadows as they navigated the treacherous terrain. The graveyard was a maze of debris, the remains of dreams and despair scattered in equal measure. Hey, over here, Rain called, spotting something glinting in the dim light. She dragged a panel aside, revealing a cache of supplies tucked away beneath the wreckage. Dax joined her, his eyes widening as he took in the find. Well, look at that. Maybe today's not a total loss after all. Don't jinx it, Rain warned, though she couldn't suppress a small smile. We might actually get out of here in one piece. Here's hoping, Dax replied, already sorting through the supplies. Let's get this back to the ship. I'm sure Felon'll want to know what we found. Yeah, Rain said, gathering up as much as she could carry. Maybe we'll actually catch a break for once. Don't say that too loud, Dax cautioned as they headed back. You know the universe loves a challenge. Rain chuckled, though the sound was more resigned than amused. True enough, she said, casting a glance back at the graveyard's looming shadows. But sometimes you've just got to laugh at the absurdity of it all. And then hope it doesn't laugh back, Dax added. Exactly, Rain agreed, though a part of her couldn't help feeling that the universe had a twisted sense of humor. They made their way back to the ship, the weight of their discovery both literal and metaphorical. As they approached the airlock, Rain couldn't shake the feeling that this small victory was just a prelude to something bigger, something that would test them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But for now, at least, they had hope, and in the grimdark corners of the universe, that was sometimes the most powerful weapon of all. The air inside the ship was thick with the stale scent of recycled failures. Rain and Dax stumbled back in, weighed down with their newfound treasure trove of questionable goods, resembling more desperate looters than rebellious freedom fighters. Ah, the dynamic duo returns, Cray announced with mock grandeur, swiveling his chair around to face them. Find anything that won't kill us immediately. Rain dropped her stash onto the floor with a clatter that echoed off the metallic walls. Some rations, a couple of tools, and I think Dax found his sense of humor somewhere out there too. Yeah, buried under a pile of cosmic garbage, Dax replied, dropping his own load. Thought I'd give it a try since everyone else is running short. Felon glanced up from the console, the lines of stress carved deep into his face. Anything in there we can use to bribe a patrol ship. The beans are particularly offensive, Rain suggested. Might serve better as a weapon. Speaking of which, Felon said, rubbing his temples, we need to talk about the Earth cuisine we've been using to torture ourselves, or possibly our enemies. If we're going to survive this blockade, we might need to think outside the can. Cray perked up at this, running a hand through his unkempt hair. You mean weaponize the beans? I knew they had destructive potential. More like weaponize all this junk food we've been lugging around, Felon clarified. We were joking before, but now that we're staring down the business end of an alien blockade, we need to get creative. Creative, huh? Rain drawled. I always thought creative was code for desperate and stupid. That's the spirit, Felon said dryly. The aliens have blockaded the graveyard tighter than a miser's purse, and we need a way out. Let me guess, Dax said, leaning against his beloved, if unreliable, console. You want us to make a run for it under cover of darkness, while somehow cloaking our ship with the power of potato chips. Not exactly, Felon replied, ignoring the sarcasm. But we might be able to use the food as a diversion. If we can launch some of it towards the blockade, it could draw their sensors, make them think we're attacking from a different direction. Cray leaned forward, intrigued. You're saying we chuck our snacks at them and hope they stop to investigate, Rain snorted. Hell of a plan, Cap, I like it. It's insane, Dax added, though a glint of mischief was growing in his eyes. Which means it might just work. Desperate and stupid, Rain repeated. I'm in. Great, Felon said with a sigh that was half resignation, half determination. Let's get to work, Dax, see if you can rig up something to launch the supplies. Rain, Cray, help sort through the stash for anything particularly odorous. We want to make sure they are intrigued enough to investigate. Yes, because no alien can resist the tempting siren call of fermented pickles, Rain said, rolling her eyes. Or day-old pretzels, Cray added with a grin. Exactly, Felon said, already feeling the headache starting to recede in the face of activity. Let's give them a taste of Earth they won't forget. As the crew scattered to their tasks, Felon returned to the console, trying to piece together a coherent plan. The blockade was a problem, sure, but it wasn't insurmountable, not if they could keep the aliens distracted long enough to slip through their fingers. The universe might have been dealing them a bad hand, but Felon knew better than anyone that sometimes you just had to bluff your way to victory. A few hours later, the ship was a hive of barely controlled chaos. Dax was muttering darkly to himself, elbow deep in the console as he rigged up an improvised launch system. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting various pieces of machinery that had no business being connected, all in service of their new weapon of mass distraction. "Are we sure this isn't going to blow up in our faces?" Rain asked, eyeing the contraption with a mix of skepticism and reluctant admiration. Dax shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "Define blow up. If you mean literally, then probably not. If figuratively, well," he trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. "Comforting," Rain replied, though she couldn't help feeling a twinge of excitement. There was something about a last-ditch, harebrained scheme that set her blood pumping. Cray appeared at her elbow, arms loaded with tins of questionable provenance. "Got the goods," he announced proudly. "Enough to give any self-respecting alien a case of intergalactic indigestion." "Perfect," Felon said, rejoining them as Dax finished securing the final connections. "Let's get this show on the road." Together, they loaded the makeshift payload into the launch mechanism, each item carefully chosen for its particular pungency. Felon couldn't help a small smile as he watched his crew work, their determination cutting through the tension like a knife. "Ready when you are, Captain," Dax called, stepping back to admire his handiwork. The contraption looked like it belonged in a scrapyard, but if it worked, Felon didn't care if it was held together with duct tape and prayers. "All right," Felon said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." They took their positions, Felon at the console. The others gathered around like spectators at a particularly ill-advised fireworks show. "Launch in 3, 2, 1. With a clatter and a series of worrying noises, the mechanism sprang into life, hurling their culinary grenades into the void. The crew watched with bated breath as the tins tumbled through space, a bizarre ballet of tin and tragedy. "Now we wait," Felon said quietly, scanning the radar for any sign of activity. If they were lucky, the aliens would take the bait, giving them the opening they needed to make a break for it. "Come on, you slimy bastards," Dax muttered, tapping his fingers against the console. "Take the bait." Minutes ticked by, each second a small eternity in the cramped confines of the ship. The crew watched the radar with hawk-like intensity, willing the green blips to shift, to scatter, to give them a chance. And then, as if in response to their collective desperation, the blockade began to move. "Looks like they're taking the bait," Cray said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "Of course they are," Rain said, grinning. "Who wouldn't want to investigate a space picnic? They're splitting their forces," Dax added, his fingers dancing over the console as he plotted a course through the newly opened gap. "We might just pull this off." "Let's not celebrate just yet," Felon cautioned. "We still have to get through without drawing attention." "Piece of cake," Rain said, though the tension in her voice belied her confidence. "Yes, sure," Cray agreed, adjusting his seatbelt with the air of a man about to ride a roller coaster for the first time. "Easy as pie." Felon glanced at his crew, taking a moment to appreciate their resilience, their humor, their refusal to back down in the face of overwhelming odds. They were more than just his crew. They were his friends, his family, and together they might just be able to pull off the impossible. "All right," he said, setting his jaw with determination. "Let's do this. Dax, take us out." "With pleasure," Dax replied, his fingers flying across the controls as he guided the ship into motion. The hull vibrated beneath them, a low rumble that spoke of imminent danger and infinite possibility. They plunged into the breach, the ship threading its way through the blockade with all the grace of a drunk dancer, but somehow miraculously it held together. "They're onto us," Rain said, her voice tight with adrenaline as the radar lit up with enemy signatures. "Damn," Felon muttered, his mind racing. "Cray, you got those one-liners ready." "Thought you'd never ask," Cray replied, gripping the armrests with white-knuckled intensity. "Hey aliens, ever tried eating Earth food? It's to die for." "Good one," Dax said, though his focus never wavered from the task at hand. "Now let's see if we can make it out of this in one piece." The ship twisted and turned, dodging enemy fire with a deftness that belied its battered exterior. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and through it all the crew held their breath, each second a testament to their determination, their grit, their refusal to give in. "Almost there," Felon said, his voice a low rumble over the chaos. "Almost isn't good enough," Rain retorted, though there was a wild glint in her eye. "We need a miracle here, or just one hell of a distraction," Dax added, punching in a series of commands that sent the ship into a gut-wrenching spin. The universe seemed to pause for a heartbeat, the ship hanging in space like a fly caught in amber. And then, with a roar that shook the bones of the ship, they burst through the blockade, the void of open space stretching endlessly before them. "We did it," Rain said, disbelief coloring her voice as she stared at the view screen. "We actually did it. Never doubted it for a second," Cray said, though his shaking hands told a different story. "Sure you didn't," Felon said, a weary smile breaking through the tension. "Nice work, everyone. Now let's see if we can find some place to lie low and figure out our next move." As the adrenaline began to ebb, the crew settled back into their seats, the weight of their narrow escape still heavy on their minds. But for now, they were alive, they were free, and that was more than enough. The universe might have had a twisted sense of humor, but as long as they could still laugh in its face, they'd find a way to keep going. One crisis at a time. The universe, as always, had a twisted sense of humor, and right now, it was having a laugh at Captain Felon's expense. The ship had made it through the blockade by the skin of its teeth, but now it drifted aimlessly in the dead of space, the crew's adrenaline high quickly crashing. The radar was about as trustworthy as a politician at election time, and the ship's engines were holding together with little more than hope, duct tape, and swearing. Felon stood at the console, staring at a screen that flickered more than his faith in this whole escapade. The radar blips had normalized, but normalcy was relative when your life depended on a spaceship that should have been condemned 3-star cycles ago. He rubbed his temples, the headache intensifying in time with the erratic blips. Rain sauntered over, a half-eaten protein bar in her hand. "So, Cap, how's our luck looking today?" "Still in that somewhere between shit and despair range. Optimistic as ever, Rain. I'd place it somewhere around we're screwed, but at least it's a scenic route to hell," Felon replied, the sarcasm clinging to his words like a bad smell. Dax, who had been quietly tinkering with the console, glanced over. "Hey, look on the bright side. At least we didn't literally blow up, just, figuratively." "Thanks for that, Dax. Really brightening my day," Felon muttered, shaking his head. Cray ambled over, a mock-serious expression plastered on his face. "So, Captain, after that miraculous breach, what's next? A dance-off with the aliens?" "I hear they've got some killer moves. Not unless your dance involves fixing the nav systems," Felon shot back. "Otherwise, we're more likely to find ourselves tap dancing in a black hole." Squeaky, their imprisoned alien companion, named for the peculiar noise it made when trying to communicate, squatted in the corner, vibrating slightly in what could only be interpreted as nervousness. Whether it was from the fear of space or the crew's antics, it was hard to tell. "Hey, Squeaky," Rain called out. "Any suggestions from our resident alien on how to avoid a cosmic blender?" Squeaky responded with a series of high-pitched squeals and clicks. The crew watched expectantly, though none of them understood a damn thing. "Yeah, definitely, Squeaky," Dax said with a sage nod. "We'll get right on that." "I'm sure the universal translator failure is just because it's having a crisis of confidence, or maybe it's refusing to work because it knows something we don't," Cray quipped, leaning back in his chair. The laughter was thin, brittle, but it was something. Felon forced a smile as he turned back to the console. "All right, enough comedy, Ior. Let's figure out where we stand before the universe decides to drop another shoe on us." The ship's systems were a symphony of malfunction and warning lights, each one a testament to their precarious situation. Felon could almost hear the universe cackling at their expense. They had eluded the blockade, but now they needed a plan before the aliens regrouped and came at them with more than just a tickle in their sensors. "What's the status on those engines, Dax?" Felon asked, hoping for a miracle but expecting a disaster. "Well," Dax replied, not looking up from his work, "if I were to describe our engines, I'd say they're about as reliable as a drunk toddler on a unicycle, but I've managed to jury-rig them back to a state of maybe won't explode, so progress." "Great," Rain said, leaning against the wall. "At this rate, we'll be the first crew to get a medal for most creative use of a failing propulsion system." Cray snorted. "Hey, it's a niche category, but we'd own it." Silence settled over the bridge, each crew member lost in their own thoughts. The reality of their situation was bleak. Their supplies were dwindling, the blockade wasn't going to stay fooled for long, and the hope of finding an uncharted safe haven was as thin as the ship's hull. Felon finally broke the quiet. "We need a plan, something to get us out of this mess before the universe decides to give us a hug we won't walk away from." Rain grimaced. "Like what, Cap?" "We've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at them, and I'm sure we could manage that too if we found some duct tape." "Might have to save that as a last resort," Felon replied. "But for now we need options, ideas, anything." Dax sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I hate to be the one to say it, but we might need to think about surrendering." A heavy silence descended, the weight of the suggestion pressing on them all. It was the unspoken fear, the elephant in the room they'd been avoiding eye contact with since this all began. "We're not there yet," Felon said firmly, though his voice lacked conviction. "We've still got time. We can figure something out." Cray gripped the arm of his chair, knuckles white. "Yeah, like a miracle. Maybe two," Rain added with a sardonic smile. The minutes dragged by, each one a reminder of their dwindling time, their narrowing options. Felon paced the bridge, trying to shake a solution loose from the tangle of despair and desperation in his mind. Squeaky let out a series of clicks, its usual attempt at communication. The sound broke the tension, and the crew looked over, the absurdity of seeking advice from an alien prisoner not lost on them. "Got something to add, Squeaky?" Felon asked, more out of exasperation than expectation. Squeaky rattled off another sequence of noises, and Cray tilted his head, studying the alien. "Maybe it's trying to tell us something about the blockade. Some kind of weakness or, I don't know, an alien dance-off after all," Dax chuckled. "Hey, if they've got 2 left feet, we might actually stand a chance." Felon rubbed his chin, an idea forming at the back of his mind. "Wait a minute, what if Squeaky's trying to tell us about the blockade's patterns? Maybe there's a way we can use that to slip through undetected." Rain raised an eyebrow. "You seriously think it's trying to help us?" "Last I checked, we've not exactly been the best hosts." "Well, it's either that or it's trying to sell us intergalactic insurance," Cray said dryly. "Better than nothing," Felon admitted. "Let's see if we can make sense of its gibberish." With renewed urgency, the crew gathered around Squeaky, trying to decipher its clicks and whirs. They worked together, piecing together a possible message, a potential path through the chaos that might just lead them to safety. Hours passed in a frenzy of activity, each crew member pushing past their exhaustion, their fear, their doubts. They were running on fumes and faith, but they were still running, still refusing to give up. They had no choice. Surrender wasn't an option, not yet. Felon looked around at his crew, his family, their determination shining through the grime and sweat of their ordeal. They were fighting, clawing for every inch of survival, and he couldn't let them down. "All right, let's see if this alien has any tricks up its sleeve that we can use," Felon said, his voice a mix of hope and resignation. "We've got a slim chance, but it's better than nothing." The crew nodded, their resolve solidifying. They were battered, broken, but not beaten. Not yet. As they huddled over the console, plotting their course, the universe watched, a bemused spectator to their struggle. It was the darkest hour, but they were still standing, still fighting. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way through the void. Felon leaned back from the console, rubbing his temples, as though he could massage inspiration directly into his brain. His headache pulsed with the rhythm of a particularly vengeful techno beat, a testament to just how royally they were screwed. "Dax," he said, waving his hand like a lazy conductor, "any chance you can make this pile of bolts do something useful, like not kill us?" Dax scratched his head, staring at the console's flickering lights like they were a particularly difficult crossword puzzle. "I dunno, Cap. These systems are more temperamental than a teenager in a mood swing competition." Cray leaned on the back of his chair, his usual grin looking a little frayed at the edges. "What if we tried talking nicely to it? You know, sweeten the deal with a bit of flattery. Maybe it's just self-conscious." Rain chuckled, sitting cross-legged on the floor, finishing off her protein bar like it was the last meal she'd ever eat. "Yeah, Cray, because nothing says reliable spaceship like the power of positive affirmations." Felon huffed, shaking his head. "Well, if sweet-talking doesn't work, maybe threats will. Dax, see if you can coax anything out of it before we start bargaining with its non-existent soul." Squeaky let out a shrill series of beeps, drawing everyone's attention. It wobbled in its makeshift cell, looking about as helpful as an alien could when surrounded by an impromptu comedy troupe. "You trying to upstage us, Squeaks?" Rain grinned, picking a crumb off her shirt. "We're still waiting for that secret weapon you promised." Squeaky responded with a flurry of clicks, its eyes blinking like a malfunctioning traffic light. "Is it just me, or does Squeaky sound more excited than usual?" Cray observed, scratching his chin. "Maybe it knows something we don't." Dax frowned, leaning closer to the console as it spat out a garbled string of alien characters. "Hold up, I think Squeaky's trying to communicate in Morse code, or whatever the alien equivalent is." "Alien Morse code," Rain snorted. "Next, you'll tell me they invented jazz." But Felon's interest was piqued. He motioned for Dax to continue. "All right, Dax, see if you can make sense of it. Maybe Squeaky's got a way out of this mess." Hours passed as Dax and Squeaky engaged in a bizarre dance of clicks and clacks, like two tech geeks bonding over their shared love of incomprehensible jargon. The rest of the crew watched with varying degrees of amusement and disbelief. Finally, Dax turned, a flicker of something that suspiciously resembled hope in his eyes. "Okay, folks, I think we've got something. Squeaky's been trying to tell us about the black hole." "Oh, great," Rain said dryly. "I was just thinking we hadn't spent enough quality time contemplating our inevitable death." "No, no," Dax insisted, waving his hands. "The black hole's energy field. Squeaky thinks we can use it to amplify psychic abilities." The room went silent, the kind of silence that usually followed someone suggesting a group jump into a shark tank because they saw $1 at the bottom. "Psychic abilities," Felon repeated incredulously. "And what, pray tell, makes Squeaky think we've got those?" Cray shrugged. I've always suspected I could predict my own bad decisions, Rain snickered. If that were true, you'd be a millionaire by now. But seriously, Dax continued, eyes wide, if we can tap into that energy and use it somehow, we might be able to cloak the ship, slip past the blockade. Felon leaned in, his skepticism warring with the glimmer of possibility. And how exactly do we tap into this cosmic superpower? I'm assuming it's more complicated than flipping a switch and chanting Kumbaya. Squeaky's got a plan, Dax replied, gesturing at their alien friend, who was vibrating with something akin to excitement. We just have to get close enough to the black hole to harness its energy. Sure, because getting cozy with a black hole is just what the doctor ordered, Cray quipped. And here I was worried today would be boring. Rain sighed dramatically. Well, it's either that or we wait for the aliens to add us to their collection of unfortunate soul specimens. Felon looked around at his ragtag crew, their faces a mix of determination and insanity. All right, let's do it, he said finally, feeling the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders like a particularly heavy blanket. Dax, see if you can work your magic with the systems. Rain, Cray, get everything ready for when we make our move. And Squeaky, just keep doing whatever it is you're doing. The preparation was frantic, the kind of organized chaos that felt like it could either save them or blow them to cosmic dust. Dax fiddled with the controls, his fingers a blur as he rerouted power, praying the ship wouldn't betray them at the last moment. Rain and Cray scrambled to secure the ship, double-checking every bolt and seal, their banter a steady stream of gallows humor as they prepared for whatever came next. So, Cray, Rain said as she tightened a loose panel, ever danced with a black hole before? Cray flashed a grin. No, but I once tangoed with a supernova. It was a bit intense. Felon, meanwhile, hovered between stations, barking orders, and trying not to think about the very real possibility they were about to become a cautionary tale for future space travelers. Remember, folks, if this works, drinks are on me. If it doesn't, well, we probably won't be around to complain. As they neared the black hole, the ship's hull groaned in protest, a symphony of metal under stress. Felon felt his stomach twist, not just from the gravitational forces, but from the gamble they were about to take. All right, folks, he called out, voice steady despite his racing heart. We're about to cross the point of no return. If anyone's got second thoughts, now's the time to voice them. Silence answered him, not the silence of fear, but the silence of resolve. They'd all chosen this path, and now they'd see where it led. Dax was muttering under his breath, a peculiar mix of curses and encouragements directed at the ship's beleaguered systems. Come on, you glorified tin can, don't let us down now. The ship shuddered as they drew closer to the black hole, its pull a relentless force threatening to tear them apart. Felon could almost feel the universe watching, a cosmic spectator waiting with bated breath to see if they'd triumph or become just another set of bones in its graveyard. Squeaky, Felon called over the rising noise. Any last-minute insights? Squeaky responded with a series of urgent clicks, its excitement palpable even through the chaos. Dax, Felon said, you're up. Let's see if we can pull a miracle out of this mess. Dax nodded, fingers flying over the console as he executed Squeaky's plan, rerouting power and aligning them with the black hole's energy field. Hold on to something, Dax warned. This might get a little bumpy. The ship bucked like a wild beast, every bolt and joint straining against the forces threatening to rip them apart. Felon gripped the console, feeling the vibrations through his bones, hoping against hope they'd survive this madness. And then suddenly, it happened. A surge of energy coursed through the ship, a tangible wave of power that seemed to resonate with something deep inside them all. Felon felt it like a tingling at the base of his skull, a strange sense of awareness that defied explanation. Whoa, Cray breathed, eyes wide. Is this what Squeaky meant? Felon nodded, feeling a cautious optimism bubbling up despite himself. I think so. Dax, are we cloaked? Dax checked the readings, a grin spreading across his face. We're as invisible as a politician's promises. It's working. Well, I'll be damned, Rain said, looking around in awe. We might just pull this off. Their spirits buoyed by the unexpected success, the crew moved with renewed urgency, preparing to execute the plan that could finally see them free of the blockade. All right, Felon said, his voice firm despite the adrenaline surging through him. Let's slip through this blockade and find ourselves somewhere safe to regroup. We've got a fighting chance now, and I don't intend to waste it. With Squeaky's plan in motion and their newfound abilities lending them an edge, they navigated the treacherous space around the blockade, each crew member acutely aware of the high stakes. The ship for once didn't betray them. The engines hummed with a steady confidence, a far cry from their usual faltering protests. Felon could almost swear he heard it purring, though he chalked that up to wishful thinking and the heady rush of potential survival. As they approached the final ring of the blockade, tension hung thick in the air. Any mistake, any slip, and it'd be all over. But for now, against all odds, they were doing it. They were defying the universe's twisted sense of humor, laughing in the face of their own fears. The crew held their breath as they navigated the final stretch, every second feeling like an eternity. Felon's heart hammered in his chest, a relentless drumbeat that matched the ship's pulse. Finally, they were through. A cheer went up, ragged and exhausted but victorious. They'd done it. They'd found a way to turn the tables, to snatch survival from the jaws of the universe's twisted whimsy. Felon slumped back in his chair, feeling the tension drain from his body like air from a punctured balloon. They'd survived another day, another crisis. "All right, folks," he said, a smile finally breaking through his usual stoicism. "Looks like I owe you all those drinks. And maybe, just maybe, we've got a shot at turning this whole rebellion around." The crew laughed, their relief palpable as they exchanged grins and shoulder pats. They'd made it through this trial by fire, battered but unbroken. And as Felon looked out at the stars, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of something he hadn't dared hope for in a long time, a future. The ship hummed with a newfound energy, though it struck Captain Felon that it was more a self-satisfied purr, like a cat that had just devoured the prized canary. He paced the command deck, his boots tapping a rhythm against the metal floor that resonated with the anticipation hanging thick in the air. "All right, you misfits," Felon barked, his voice carrying a rough edge of command. "We've got one chance to make this work. Let's not screw it up and end up as space debris, yeah." Dax, elbows deep in the guts of the console, shot back with a grin. "Relax, Cap. We're invisible and our psychic mojo's juiced up to 11. What could possibly go wrong?" Cray snickered from where he leaned against the bulkhead, arms folded. "You just jinxed us, Dax." "Now we're definitely gonna explode." Rain snorted from her spot on the floor where she was meticulously checking her gear. "If we explode, I'm haunting you both. You'll never escape the sound of my voice." "And what a terrifying prospect that is," Cray teased, earning him an eye roll and a half-hearted kick in his direction. Squeaky, their resident alien enigma, emitted a series of excited clicks, looking like an overgrown bioluminescent jellyfish on caffeine. Felon could only hope that meant they were on the right track. "Squeaky says we're lined up for psychic overdrive," Dax translated, his hands working magic across the console. "Time to make those aliens regret ever blockading us." The plan, as harebrained as it sounded, was simple. Use their newfound psychic cloak to drift right into the heart of the alien fleet, dump Earth's food supplies, and watch chaos ensue. If luck was on their side, and that was a big if, getting out alive would be the garnish. Felon took a deep breath, the kind that tasted like tension and smelled like an impending headache. "Let's do this, Dax. Keep us hidden. Cray, Rain, be ready to drop the cargo. Squeaky, just keep clicking and clacking." The ship lurched forward, the engines humming with a confidence that belied their usual patchwork condition. Felon could feel every vibration, every shift, and prayed silently to any cosmic deity that might be listening. It was go time. As they approached the alien fleet, Felon couldn't help but admire, with a twisted sense of irony, the sheer number of ships arrayed against them. "Talk about overkill," he muttered. "It's like they're expecting an invasion, not a bunch of ragtag rebels. Someone should tell them they're the ones overcompensating," Rain quipped, eyes glued to her terminal. "We're just here to deliver lunch. Hope they like it spicy," Cray added, a mischievous glint in his eye. Nothing spices up a blockade like a surprise delivery. They drifted closer, the cloaking holding steady under Dax's careful management. The alien ships loomed like silent sentinels, unaware of the chaos about to be unleashed right under their noses. "Squeaky's giving the signal," Dax announced, his voice tight with concentration. "We're in position, ready to drop the payload on your command, Captain." Felon took a moment, letting the gravity of the moment settle over him. "All right," he said, injecting a calmness into his voice that he didn't quite feel. "Let's serve some cosmic justice." On my mark now, Rain and Cray moved in tandem, years of working together manifesting in a seamless execution. The ship shuddered as the cargo bay doors opened, releasing their precious, and now decidedly explosive, payload into the void. "Bombs away," Rain called, her voice tinged with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "Hope they like our special delivery." The crates of food, each rigged with enough pyrotechnics to make a fireworks display on New Year's look like a birthday candle, floated silently towards their targets. A few moments later, the night sky lit up with a series of brilliant explosions, disorienting the alien fleet. "Talk about a light show," Cray exclaimed, watching the chaos unfold. "Remind me to never piss off a chef if that's what they can do with groceries." Felon watched the alien ships scatter like startled birds, their formation breaking as they struggled to adapt to the unexpected assault. "Stay sharp, everyone," he ordered. "They'll regroup fast. We need to slip out before they realize what hit him." Dax worked the controls with a deftness that spoke of both skill and desperation. "Cloak's holding, but we're pushing it. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they figure out where we are." "Then let's not waste them," Felon replied, steering the ship through the pandemonium. Rain, keep an eye on the radar, and Cray, get ready with those evasive maneuvers. The ship danced through the chaos, a phantom among the alien vessels still reeling from the attack. Felon's heart pounded in time with the ship's engines, each second stretching out as they navigated the treacherous path to freedom. Almost out, Rain reported, her eyes flicking between her instruments and the view outside. Another couple 100 kilometers and we're clear. Feels like 100 light years, Dax muttered, fingers still flying over his console. Come on, baby, just a little longer. Felon could see the edge of the blockade now, the stars beyond beckoning like a long-lost promise. Keep it together, folks, he urged, feeling the tension ratchet up another notch. We're not out of this yet. Just then, a sudden jolt rocked the ship, sending everyone sprawling. Klaxons wailed, the ship's systems screaming in protest. What the hell was that? Felon demanded, scrambling back to his feet. Debris field, Rain answered, her voice tight with urgency. From the explosions, it's messing with the cloak. Can't catch a break, can we? Cray grumbled, steadying himself. Squeaky emitted a frantic series of clicks, its lights flashing in a rapid sequence that didn't need translation. It was time to move, and fast. Hold it together, team, Felon urged, voice steady despite the chaos. We're almost there. Dax, can you boost the cloak, just for a few more minutes? Dax nodded, though his expression was grim. I'll try, but no promises. We're flying on fumes as it is. With a deep breath, Felon adjusted their course, skirting the edge of the debris field with every ounce of skill he could muster. The ship shuddered under the strain, but held, pushing through the final stretch with a determination born of necessity. Almost there, Rain repeated, her voice a lifeline through the din. Just a little more. Felon held his breath as they passed the last of the alien ships, the cloak flickering like a candle in the wind. Come on, and then they were through. A collective sigh of relief swept through the crew, the weight of their gamble lifting as they broke free of the blockade. The alien fleet, now in disarray, was left behind, scrambling to regain control in the wake of their unexpected rebellion. We did it, Felon said, disbelief coloring his tone. We actually did it. Cray let out a whoop of joy, pumping his fist in the air. Hell yeah. Never doubted it for a second. Speak for yourself, Dax replied, collapsing back in his chair. I was pretty sure we were toast back there. Rain laughed, the sound a balm to their frayed nerves. Well, we showed them what humans are made of, but they didn't see that coming. Felon allowed himself a rare moment of triumph, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. All right, team, let's put some distance between us and them. We've got a rebellion to get back to after all. As the ship sped away from the blockade, the stars stretching out before them like a promise, Felon felt a surge of something he'd almost forgotten, hope. They'd survived another day, another impossible challenge, and lived to tell the tale. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the universe watched, perhaps with a grudging respect for the ragtag crew that had dared to defy the odds and laugh in the face of their own doom. For now, they had won. The future, still uncertain, lay ahead, but as long as they had breath in their bodies and fire in their hearts, they'd fight for it. Because there was nothing more terrifying to a universe bent on its own sadistic humor than a group of humans who refused to give up. Let's set course for the nearest safe zone, Felon ordered, his voice steady. We've got a rebellion to regroup and a universe to surprise. And as the ship sailed into the blackness, their laughter echoed in the cabin, a defiant, joyous sound that promised tomorrow was theirs for the taking. The stars stretched into infinity, indifferent to human struggles, but they sure provided a hell of a backdrop for a victory dance. The ship sailed away from the alien blockade, a tin can held together more by sheer willpower than any adhesive substance. Captain Felon leaned back in his chair, contemplating the absurdity of their survival. Maybe the universe did have a soft spot for underdogs. Or maybe it just enjoyed watching trains, or in this case spaceships, nearly collide in slow motion. You know, Cray said, brushing imaginary dust off his shoulders, I always said we'd make it. Of course, I also said I'd never eat space rations again, and here we are. He flashed a grin so cocky it could only be rivaled by his penchant for self-preservation. You're a regular prophet, Cray, Rain snorted, reassembling her gear with the precision of someone who expected it to explode at any moment. And if we're naming things we swore off, how about my promise to never fly again? Ironic, given our current predicament. Felon smirked, rubbing the bridge of his nose like it might somehow alleviate the impending migraine. Let's just say we've all broken a few vows today. Anyone else feel like the universe is our abusive older sibling with a magnifying glass? Dax chimed in, his fingers still dancing over the console. He seemed born to be in front of it, like some kind of tech whisperer. So, Cap, what's the plan now? More importantly, when do we get to rub this in the aliens' faces? The captain glanced at the view outside, the alien fleet now a distant, disorganized mess. I'd say we're better off basking in the glory of being a cosmic thorn in their side for now. As for the plan, we're heading for the nearest safe zone. I'd say a pit stop for repairs is on the menu. Our ship's held together by optimism and whatever they use to coat cheap noodles. Squeaky clicked enthusiastically from its corner, glowing like an overexcited Christmas decoration. Apparently, the little alien was just as thrilled about their success, or maybe it was just happy to still be alive. Hard to tell with a face full of tentacles. "You got anything useful to add, Squeaky?" Cray asked, still grinning like a kid who got away with stealing cookies from the jar. Squeaky responded with a series of rhythmic clicks that somehow sounded like alien laughter. It was a comforting noise, if you ignored the fact that their resident jellyfish looked like it could double as a nightclub light show. "Well, I think we managed to impress it," Rain mused, adjusting her seatbelt in case the universe decided to throw another curveball. "Or it's just gloating. You know how aliens love their superiority complexes. Who doesn't love a good gloat?" Dax shrugged, taking a moment to relax as much as his chair would allow. "But seriously, Captain, what's our angle here? We've poked the proverbial hornet's nest. What next? Do we keep poking or do we run and hide?" Felon considered this, tapping his chin thoughtfully. "We've made our point, but the thing about points is they're useless unless you follow through. We keep our heads down for now, regroup, then we see if we can't rally some more support. We've shown them humans aren't just squishy targets with a penchant for pyrotechnics," Rain added, allowing herself a small grin. "We should get t-shirts made." Cray chuckled, leaning against the bulkhead like it was a favorite bar. "Can't argue with that." "But seriously, anyone want to take bets on how long before the aliens come looking for payback?" "I give it a week," Dax said, raising an eyebrow. "Long enough for them to lick their wounds and short enough to remind us we're living on borrowed time." "Borrowed time with interest," Felon corrected, feeling the full weight of their precarious situation settle over him again. "They're not going to forget this." "But then neither are we." Squeaky clicked again, a softer, almost reassuring tone filtering through its usual garbled chatter. Maybe it was the alien equivalent of a pep talk, or maybe it was just hungry. Either way, it seemed content, and that was good enough for Felon. "All right," he said, straightening up with a determined glint in his eye. "Enough dwelling on doom and gloom. Let's focus on what we've got. A ship that somehow still flies, a crew who can pull off the impossible, and a rebellion that just got a whole lot more interesting." "Spoken like someone who's just realized they're stuck with us," Rain teased, nudging him with her elbow. Felon chuckled, a sound that was more genuine than he'd expected. "Can't say I could find better company, even if I tried, and that's why we haven't mutinied yet," Cray said, pretending to polish an invisible badge of honor. Dax frowned in mock confusion. "You mean we had the option?" Rain laughed, her voice cutting through the tension like a ray of sunshine through storm clouds. "Let's save that for when we're old and need a good story. Remember that time we almost died and decided mutiny was a viable retirement plan?" "Sounds like a bestseller," Felon agreed, setting course for the nearest safe zone, a speck on the navigation map that promised relative security and the chance to breathe easy, if only for a moment. As the ship powered forward, the crew settled into a comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts. They'd bought themselves time, a priceless commodity in a universe that seemed hell-bent on making life difficult. Yet, as the stars blurred past, Felon couldn't help but feel a flicker of optimism, a rare and fleeting thing, but there nonetheless. Despite the relentless odds, they'd won a small victory, a spark in the dark vastness of space. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was turning a spark into a flame. "Ready to put some distance between us and our over-friendly neighbors?" Felon asked, more a rhetorical question than anything else. Dax gave a thumbs up from his console. "Juice is looking good. Engines might not explode. Today's a good day. Let's not tempt fate," Rain interjected, buckling her harness more tightly. "I'd like a few hours of peace before our next near-death experience." Cray snorted. "Peace? On this ship, you'd have better luck finding a straight answer from a politician." "Hey now, let's not aim for the impossible," Felon replied, pulling up the navigational data. "All right, folks, let's see what our future holds. Here's to hoping it's not filled with more of those charming alien fleets." The ship hummed along, a testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness, as fragments of debris faded into the background. Each crew member settled into their respective roles, comfortable in the chaos they'd somehow crafted into a semblance of order. As they put distance between themselves and the blockade, the enormity of their actions began to sink in. They weren't just running anymore, they were fighting back, not just for themselves, but for every human who'd ever been pushed around by an indifferent universe. "What do you think?" Rain asked, breaking the silence that had grown heavier with each passing light year. "Think the universe is finally taking us seriously?" Cray shrugged, unconcerned. "More like it's realized we're too stubborn to quit or too stupid. Either way, we're not going anywhere." "Here's to being stubborn and stupid then," Dax deadpanned, raising an imaginary glass. Felon watched them, a smirk playing on his lips. "Stubborn, stupid, and successful. Sounds like a winning combination to me." "You know," Squeaky interjected with a series of clicks, "I never doubted any of you. The room fell silent at that, each member processing the sentiment in their own way. Squeaky's endorsement carried weight despite, or maybe because of its alien nature. It was a reminder that even in a universe filled with those who'd see them fail, allies could be found in the most unexpected places. "Thanks, Squeaky," Felon said, meaning it more than he could express. "Nice to know someone has faith in us." Rain chuckled, breaking the growing tension. "Of course, the day we start taking advice from a glowing jellyfish is the day we really need to reassess our lives." "Speak for yourself," Cray shot back. "I've been taking advice from worse. Like your last date," Dax suggested innocently. "Low blow," Cray replied, feigning a pained expression. "But fair." As laughter filled the command deck, the mood lifted, each member buoyed by the shared levity. It was a temporary reprieve, but it was enough. Enough to remind them why they fought, why they persevered against staggering odds. "Let's keep that momentum going," Felon decided, checking their course. "We've got a galaxy to convince that humans are more than just cannon fodder." "Here's to proving them wrong," Dax said, adjusting the controls with practiced ease. "And making them regret ever underestimating us," Rain added, her eyes gleaming with determination. Cray nodded, leaning back with a satisfied sigh. "Anyone else feel like we might actually have a shot at this?" As if in agreement, the ship's engines purred, a comforting sound that promised, at least for the moment, that they were heading somewhere better. "One step at a time," Felon said, allowing himself to believe it. "As long as we keep moving forward, we're doing all right." The ship cut through the vastness of space, a small beacon of rebellion in a universe that loved to test its inhabitants. But for now, they'd won. A small victory in a long war, but a victory nonetheless. As the stars continued to stretch out before them, the crew of the patchwork ship allowed themselves the luxury of hope. It was a dangerous thing, hope. It could lead you down paths you never intended to tread, show you dreams you never dared dream. But it was also the thing that fueled revolutions, that inspired legends. And they, the ragtag band of misfits and rebels, were nothing if not legendary in their defiance. "Here's to the next chapter," Felon thought, a sense of calm settling over him as the ship pressed on through the darkness. "Here's to proving them all wrong."